Usually when we say next, we mean the far future.
But this week, we mean tomorrow, CES 2020.
Why is Apple back at the massive tech show after almost 30 years?
I'm Alexis Cordato, and this is Future Forward.
And I am Steven Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa, how are you?
Hey, Steve. I am great. Just
excellent.
Winding down, end of the year, 2019.
It has been an intense year. Technically, socially, emotionally, politically. It's been in 2019. Don't mind seeing it in the rearview mirror, not going to lie.
I don't mind either, but I don't think 2020 is going to be any different.
Well, this week's show, we have 3 chapters. We're going to explore CES 2020 and just kind of give everybody a snapshot of where things are going that we know are going to happen. This is going to be very practical. Then we're going to do just a little bit of healthcare 2020 and some startling research there. And then finally, our friends from IEEE, Glenn Zorpet, is going to come on and talk about AI and AI innovation and where that's going in the far future, or maybe never, depending on what you believe. But let's start with CES, because that's a good place to start.
Are you going this year?
So that's officially no. I don't. I usually am on a panel or I have a thing to do. This year I don't have a plan. I half expect someone's going to email me in the next 48 hours and say you have to be at this thing, in which case I will go. But I also, the Media Lab has a ton of events coming up in early January. So probably all things being equal, I will not be in Vegas, which is so sad.
Oh, so I've never been. So this is like, I'm not sure how much I can contribute to this opening segment, but.
Well, you should go. It's incredibly painful. All right, let me give you the headlines, and then we'll talk about why this year could be important.
Okay.
It's unbelievably massive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just remember
like South by Southwest, but like 10 times bigger.
And they're football fields. They're like adjacent football fields. So you're like, you literally could start at one end and walk all day and not get to the other end.
Wow.
Now, that presumes you stop and look at things along the way. Mm-hmm. And there are chunks of each football field that are so completely uninteresting, you'll be like, why is this here? Like, why? But if you think about consumer electronics, right? I mean, it's everything from kitchen appliances to automobiles to driverless cars to television sets to computers to Internet of the iOS, Internet of the Home stuff. I mean, it's really increasingly it's everything in your life, and then it's digital health, and it goes, and media, and it goes on and on and on. That being said, here's why it matters and why I thought it was important at the end of this year to talk about CES. First of all, it's January 7th. So it is the starting gun of the new technical year. It's like, on your mark, it's at. And if you work for a consumer electronics show, it ruins your new year.
I can imagine.
Yeah, because you're prepping and moving, and the booths are enormous. But much of what is at CES is actually like in the marketing pipeline. So as opposed to vaporware or ideas or theories of where the world might go, lots of what's there is going to be on the shelves at Christmas in 2020.
Okay. Well, it's hardware, so it's mostly locked in.
Yeah, and the stuff the other reason I like going is, as opposed to reading a press release or watching a video, when you're there, you can walk into a booth and you can smell the realness factor. Like if the thing they're showing in the booth is sealed in a plexiglass box and they won't let you touch it. We're going to have it ready, but this is a prototype and we can't take it out of the box. Then it's bullshit.
Okay.
So there's certain, you'll come away going, I thought that was maybe 3 years away, but I really, I saw in the eyes of the people in the booth that they've seen it work, and it's a real thing. And
So it's not a fake it till you make it.
no, it's just no. And now there are quirky parts of CES that are like little startup-y, mom and pop, goofy, weird stuff where you can also see amazing, amazing things. But the thing about this year, there's a 1-2 headline from this year that our listeners can be sure of, and that is Apple is going to be back. So Apple made the decision in 1992 to bail out of CES and start its own Apple singular, totally controlled, Steve Jobs centric Apple presentation. Keep in mind, this is now 30 years ago. It's a different time. Consumer electronics was a different thing. But Apple has never gone. And that's weird. And it's weird because when you walk the show, Apple is everywhere. They're not present. The company is not there, but Apple devices, Apple Connected, AirPlay, all that stuff.
They've like that though, right? Like they never had like at Apple on Twitter, and they never like with the rise of social media, they never like got into the fray of engaging with consumers online. So it kind of doesn't surprise me. It's very on brand of Apple.
Yeah, but it's also there's a certain kind of elitist. We don't play well with others. We don't want our booth to be next to Sony and Intel and IBM and Microsoft. We just want to not be there.
Right.
But meanwhile, anyone like anyway. So them going this year is a big deal. Even they're not going as a booth. They're just going to participate in a panel. But it's still getting lots of press. The fact that they're going at all, and they're going to talk about privacy. And I think really the starting gun of 2020 is that it is the year in which devices and privacy and where those lines are drawn is a big deal.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Apple has an unfair advantage in the privacy space because they own the devices and they don't make money from selling your identity.
Right. They very little or no dependency on advertising.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, they do want to sell you Apple Plus, Apple TV Plus, the news thing. I mean, they increasingly want to be in the subscription business.
Right.
So I guess they want to know a little bit what you're reading or clicking on. But so far, they've taken the high ground on the privacy issues and seem willing to call out with kind of purposeful snark, the Facebook, Twitter, Google, privacy, pirates, if you will.
Right.
There's a bunch of early CES. Everyone's very careful about what they release and when they release it, and it's all about trying to win a press battle. But there is some early buzz about what the big noise is going to be, and certainly everyone's looking to Apple to be a starting gun in a new chapter. So
I think it's smart. Like if you think about all of the conversations related to Google Home, Amazon Echo, Facebook Portal, there's a question which is, do you really want these devices listening to you?
Okay.
Right? And so I think if Apple is going to take a stance and say that we are fundamentally different because we don't care about that, I mean, what better stage to do it than CES?
Yeah. Having said that, let's not forget that Apple does have, Siri. Mm-hmm. So, although I don't know about in your world, but Siri has faded into the background.
I don't use Siri.
Given the fact that they were early, I don't understand how. I don't know. There's just about once every 3 months I say, I turn it back on my phone. I'm like, hey Siri, blah blah blah, and I ask it some question, and then it says, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'm out.
Right.
So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else critically important. Apple is sending their senior director of global privacy to speak at a roundtable event. That's, so it won't be, you won't see Tim Cook there, at least officially not. But yeah, here. So this is the headline from Business Insider. CEO Tim Cook has repeatedly said the company views privacy as a fundamental human right and has no motivation to collect and monetize consumer data. How can you not like that quote, right? I mean,
Right.
So here's the other Business Insider. Apple has placed a billboard prominently on the Las Vegas Strip where CES takes place, advertising the iPhone's privacy capabilities. In the years prior, CES show floor has been filled with third-party products and accessories that worked with Apple devices. So, I mean, yeah, there clearly was a coordinated effort among device makers to announce new features to support Apple for capabilities, said Frank Gilbert. That's interesting. So Apple, you don't put you don't rent a billboard on the Strip at CES by accident. That decision was made 6 months ago, 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And that the space was booked. They paid a premium for it. Everyone wanted that billboard. Apple, paid up to get it. So privacy. So they have a messaging calendar that had privacy 2020, as the first option. What you know the space better than I do. 12 months ago. So good. So privacy would be a good conversation. And by the way, I've talked about this on the pod before. I mean, I think that the parallel to privacy is consumers' control of their own data, which gives them control of how messages come to them and what they get paid, what value they trade in exchange for being marketed to. I think that's unbelievably fabulous if it happens.
Yeah, we need the equivalent of like nutrition labels on our tech.
Yeah. Well, I agree, but now I'm trying to think of where they'd go. It would so mess up the phone.
Well, it's basically like, I mean, at least on websites, you can imagine like view source in your browser, and it'll tell you sort of like, oh, this is hooked up to these APIs. Here's what data is being stored. I mean, we can get there, at least in the website side of things. Devices, not so sure.
Right, and closed networks like Facebook and those things, that's another debate as well.
Right.
All right, so the other headline that I wanted to share, because it came out and it made me think that you're always trying to imagine what 2020 is going to be and also what CES is going to be. And I really like the idea that 2020 is also the year of the robot. Partly just because I like robots.
I know, you love robots.
I do. It's... I do. But I like, if there's anything that could make me get on a plane and go to the horrible, overwhelming CES in 2020, it would be the lure of the robots.
How about like a petting zoo and it's just all electronic animals?
The truth is I don't have one. All right, so here's a headline from Forbes that's just to give you an idea of kind of the thing we're not going to. Making an appearance this year will be Mark Benioff, Mark Cuban, Meg Whitman, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Larry King, Katie Couric, Maria Menounos, Dr. Oz, Ludacris, LL Cool J, NSYNC's Joey Fatone, George. I mean,
sorry, that's so random. Like, one of these things is not like the other.
After hours, there'll be an HBO Westworld experience, plus Drake, Kygo, and Diplo. Anyway, so and then Future Food, Impossible Foods will be there. I mean, it's not electronics anymore. It's celebrity, it's investors, and we'll track it closely, listeners, as will most of the various tech podcasts out there. But we'll try and come up with some observations and some wisdom from the floor that hopefully will be interesting enough that you won't, hang up on us. All right, so we have just a few minutes to get to chapter 2, and I want to make sure we have time to. So let's talk about tech and healthcare 2020, and not just wearables. There was a headline in this FierceHealthcare.com article that kind of jumped off the page at me, and I'll get to it in a minute. But Alexa, do you think 2020 is a big year for wearables for tech and healthcare? Or?
sure if it's like a light switch kind of situation. I just think that we've been approaching, we've sort of had this like crescendo in terms of consumer adoption, right? Like the Apple Watch, for example, as a product has become sort of very successful in a way where I thought when it was first released that it was sort of going to be like a hit or miss kind of thing, and it definitely is a hit, right? So I actually just think that it's, I'm not sure if 2020 is a year we can isolate it, but I definitely think that, wearable devices and consumer adoption of health gadgets is definitely mainstream.
So I think that two things. I went and did my annual physical 3 months ago and was shocked at how much time my doctor spent typing on a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of it is federal legislation, some of it's electronic medical records, but and then I needed a prescription refilled, and the way to do it was to go on to his practice website and put in a message, and that he got back, was either someone pretending to be him or seemed like him, got back to me and said it had been filled and told me what pharmacy it was at. And I was like I just, it made me a little sad that someone who was trained to care for people had become kind of a very high-end data entry person.
Right.
And, so in reading this article, there was this startling statistic about midway through about doctors and burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And it said 44% of doctors surveyed said they were burned out.
That's so disturbing.
I found
not surprising.
Yeah, terrifying, right? Because the last thing you want is someone caring for you who's literally just sapped of energy.
Right, like can't take care of themselves.
Yeah. And so on one hand, optimistic Steve says this will be, we'll start to automate some of the back end data entry management, prescription refilling hoo-ha that should not be in the hands of medical professionals, but really could be AI. And then pessimistic Steve says none of that shit's ever going to work.
Why not?
Because you've got insurance companies talking to pharmacies, talking to medical practices, talking to third-party providers. They've all got legacy systems. They don't hook together very well. There's HIPAA issues all over the place. Oh, sorry, buzzword. HIPAA, the Health something Privacy Act, Health Information Privacy Act. Mm-hmm. So there's all the, you can't just, your doctor can't just take your medical information and send it over to CVS. There's a whole issue of that information not being shared publicly without a whole set of permissions. I'm not a medical ethicist or technologist, so take no advice from me.
So it's so interesting. So now that you're at Media Lab and you're on a W2, right?
Yep.
Did you change your health plan?
Oh, you have to, sure.
So I'm not sure what your experience is like, but when I did this, like even the interface and the software to access benefits and all of the language, like explanation of benefits and reimbursement and PPO and in-network and out-of-network. It's like the most complex system where, forget even major advances in technology. I almost just wish that even like the web experience was 10-15% better.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly complicated, and we're smart people and we're technologists, both of us, mm-hmm. and we're both overwhelmed by the complexity. So imagine if you were, somebody working, a blue collar person just making a living and trying to get health care. Well, do you want to do a PPO or a, it's like, I don't, or a POS? And the fact that they call it POS, by the way, mm-hmm. does not everyone understand that acronym has other meaning?
They need tech, they need marketing, they need an upgrade all around.
So So just very, very quickly, because then we'll get on to talking about AI in the future. So the fiercehealthcare.com article essentially says three things that I think are worth paying attention to. Legislation will be integral to advancing digital health. Okay, I agree that some of this is going to come from the federal government. Two, digital health evolution will require new tech.
Mm-hmm.
I like that too. And then last but not least, there was one more headline. Consumer trends in digital health will drive provider adoption and implementation. So,
Yep.
I don't have any Fitbit. I don't have any of those things. I don't have an Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I would want one if someone said, "Hey, for the holidays, I'm buying you an Apple Watch." I think I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't know."
Yeah. I used to have a Fitbit. I mean, I've gone on and off these devices. You know what I find is interesting is on the point about federal legislation being integral. Remember when, I guess during the Obama years, EMRs, electronic medical records,
Yep.
were such a hot ticket like item. It was almost like representative of like healthcare reform. I feel like I don't hear anything tech oriented in political conversations related to healthcare in the way that
Interesting.
EMRs were. But maybe I'm just like not paying enough attention.
Well, no, I think, well, it isn't that you're not paying enough attention. It's that it's not floating up above background noise to the point where you can pay attention to it.
Okay, that's fair. But don't you think EMRs, right? In During the election, it was so that was the first time I even heard of the term. And I feel like healthcare conversations now with legislation aren't even really talking about it.
Yeah, no, I think, look, the fantasy of technology is it's going to solve problems. And the reality, which you and I know and we talk about every week, is that it solves some problems and creates new ones. And I think in the case of healthcare, there's a question about whether or not the new ones it's creating exceed the ones it's solving for.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the big future. Let's rope in Glenn Zorpet from IEEE and talk about AI and the Turing test. So we've been to CES, and then we explored healthcare a little bit, and now we're going to kind of get into exploring the future as we wrap up this year. And I have to say, Glenn, I did not know that there had been a winner of the Turing test. I did not know that. For some reason, I think I missed this headline. So we're going to talk about Yoshua Bengio and some of his thoughts about where AI is going. He seems brilliant and young. I expected him to be 200 years old.
Yeah, no, it's well, computer science is kind of a young person's discipline. In many ways, it's like what physics was 200 or 300 years ago. It's there's this thing that's been generally recognized for a while that physicists tend to do their best work in their 20s. And I don't know that that's quite the same thing with computer science, but computer science is definitely a field where, it's just the energy and the intensity and the freshness of thought that's required in many ways. So you see a lot of young people making huge contributions, and he's actually probably somewhat old in his 40s, or I'm not sure, but kind of an old man in this field.
So here's what I found interesting about the interview. AI is being played as the boogeyman a lot these days in the media. And I found the tone of the conversation, maybe you could just kind of set it up for us, but I found it like neither threatening nor wildly optimistic, but just very kind of rational about where things were going.
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding of AI in the popular media, I have to say. And it's fascinating for me because I've been writing about AI and talking to people about it for a long time. So I've seen, for more than 25, 30 years. So I've seen big cycles. I came into technology journalism sort of in the beginning of what was called the AI winter, when there were wild promises made in the 70s and early 80s. And then when they didn't materialize, people just kind of gave up on it. There was like widespread disgust, funding dried up, graduate students, the most promising graduate students stopped going into this. And now we're seeing the whole cycle start up again because of kind of one thing, a new development in AI, which is called deep learning. So the thing about Bengio, who you just mentioned, is that he is actually old enough that he was keeping alive. He may actually be in his 50s now that I think about it, but he was keeping alive, even in the AI winter, in the frigid depths of the AI winter. He was kind of keeping the faith, and he was sort of preaching the gospel of deep learning. And he was one of a couple of people, Jan LeCun, Geoffrey Hinton, who won the Turing Prize because they basically revived AI with this specific technique called deep learning. So deep learning is the thing that is behind face recognition, language recognition. It's being deployed in self-driving cars. So a lot, analysis of X-ray images to show whether a tumor is cancerous and so on. These things that we've all seen that have startled us because they have gone beyond human capability. It's mostly all deep learning. So that's what this excitement is.
And the Turing test, maybe just give our listeners just a snapshot of what it is, so we make sure we don't lose anybody in the dust.
It's a prize given out every year by the Association for Computing Machinery, I believe, and it's the top prize that they give out. And to some people, it's considered like the Nobel Prize of computing, although I don't think the amount of money is anywhere near the Nobel Prize, but it's an extremely prestigious prize. So, so the fact that he has won it is a testament to, how influential and how important he's been to deep learning, well, to artificial intelligence, but it shows the ascendance of deep learning and really signifies that deep learning is really the computer technique and science that's probably going to have the biggest impact going forward. And that's sort of the controversy, because he has made his mark now trying to go beyond the limitations of deep learning. Because in the last year or two or so, there's been this chorus of voices saying, listen, deep learning is really limited, and we're really fast approaching those limits. Gary Marcus at NYU is perhaps the most vocal person in this train of thought, in this school of thought. And
this is the deep learning doesn't work school of thought?
Well, it's not that it doesn't work. It's that it's never going to fulfill the promise of AI or do what we all want. Never. And we've got to find something else, because it's a dead end. I mean, it's starting to do remarkable things, and it's going to do more remarkable things, but it's not going to come anywhere near the promise that we all have for AI. So to go back a little bit, I got interested in computers in the late 70s and early 80s. As I said, this was sort of it was still the AI winter at that time, but there were still a lot of books around, and academics and others. I remember when I was a young person spending a summer at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in the summer of '78. But, there was a lot of excitement still lingering from this idea that computers were going to soon replicate human thinking and consciousness. So there was wild enthusiasm because computers were getting more and more powerful. Moore's law was recognized and kicking in, and people actually thought in those days that all you got to do is keep making computers more and more powerful, and then someday they were going to magically spring into human level consciousness, thought, and intelligence. And of course, that was crazy. I mean, it was nuts. In retrospect, we look and how can we think that? So then after that, there was a recognition that, okay, the software is really important. We just have to get the right software, and we'll have this flowering into, human level reasoning, intelligence, understanding, and thought. And, that was kind of the birth of AI, really, in some way. That we just have to get the right thought, the right kind of software and architecture, and it'll all happen. So that led to efforts to think about how the human brain does what it does and try to replicate that, because there's the reasoning, right? If we know our brains are doing it, all we got to do is kind of figure out how our brains do it and try to replicate that. So that gave rise to this thing called neural networks. And neural it's not a mistake. This name, it was a large scale and early attempt to try to replicate what happens with neurons and do it with computers and technology. So that's where we are now. The system, the kind of the hardware configuration that we use is called the algorithmic configuration, called a neural network. And what we do on it, the technique, is called deep learning. So those are the two things. That is what all the excitement is today. And what has happened is that we have found that this combination, neural networks and deep learning, can do specific things really well, like better than we can do them even. But the things are really specific. And, if you just try to do something that's very, very similar but a little bit different, the computer falls on its face.
Yep.
So it's very brittle. It's very, very brittle. And so the juncture where we are today is that people are trying to think, how can we break out of this? Because everyone knows if we never manage to break out of this, deep learning is never going to be anything more than a very interesting and powerful tool for certain things, but it's never, ever going to fulfill anything like the promise that people have had all along for AI. So we might get cars that drive themselves. We'll get great face recognition, which we kind of have already. We might get full convenient natural language translation or something like it, but we're not going to get home robots type things or delivery robots and all these things that can make decisions and operate in complex, unstructured environments and, really, really be our partners in many ways. We're not going to get that.
So explain, I tried to understand and then I decided I gave up and I was just going to ask you. So explain Bengio's the consciousness prior issue that he's trying to his students are working on.
So Bengio is one of the foremost people in the world who's trying to figure out ways around this dead end. And he is concentrating on a variety of things that human brain does instinctively that computers don't do. And one of the things he's focusing on is causality. So this is very, very important because it's central to the intelligence that we humans have. So, for example, if you hear of a scenario where a person is driving in a car and they spill scalding hot coffee into their lap and then have a car crash, it all makes sense to you, right? Like, yeah, like they spilled scalding hot coffee. Of course they crashed their car. That's causality. The fact that the hot coffee went right into their lap and then the car crashed, that's a perfect example of causality. For a computer, there'd be no link. The computer would not draw any connection between those two at all. It would be like two completely unrelated things because you haven't taught the computer painstakingly and specifically that, yeah, you dump hot coffee in your lap and that's bad. You could very well get distracted and crash your car if you're traveling at high speed. All these things are instinctive to us. None of them are to a computer. So Hinton is trying to find the essence of these causality concepts and inculcate them into a computer because without it, they can't ever hope to have the kind of reasoning, instinctive reasoning, and intelligence about the world that we have. It's part of a larger thing where humans use memory and imagination and reasoning to make inferences. I mean, we just navigate the world doing this all the time, but computers don't do that, and deep learning doesn't do that. I mean, so it's a big challenge. I mean, he's optimistic about it, and there are a lot of very, very smart people trying to do this, but it's not going to happen soon. I mean, I personally have doubts about whether I'll see it in my lifetime. I mean, we might see some early fruits of it, but it's a huge challenge.
So we're gonna put a pin in this next conversation and have it somewhere in 2020 because the thing we didn't get to, but I want to make sure we have it down the road, is where quantum computing fits into the speed of all of this change. Because I don't know, I say that with the caveat being we're not going to get into it today because we have to all travel. We've all got places to go, and have a fabulous holiday, Glenn. And we will see you in the new year. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Okay, you too.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that we ended the year by being able to fully understand the future of AI.
I don't know if I fully understand anything.
I don't understand it a bit. I love Glenn to death, but he's like living in an alternate future universe that we get to visit once every couple of weeks. Yeah, he is. He's our new Jet. By the way, we should. Oh, that's a great idea. All right, we've got to find a picture of the Jetsons and put Glenn's face on George Jetson. I think I might do that. All right, we are out of time. Have a fabulous holiday, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy. Daughter Judy. Jane, his wife.